My name is Eve Adams, and at 32 years old, I never thought I'd be choosing between my financial security and my family. The text from my younger brother Ryan lit up my phone on a Monday morning. I'm quitting my job. You'll cover my rent. After years of bailing him out, something inside me finally snapped. I typed back 6 words that would change everything. Pay it yourself. I had no idea those words would lead to family exile, financial warfare, and ultimately my freedom. If you're watching this video, drop a comment telling me where you're from and hit that subscribe button because I'm about to share how I escaped a lifetime of financial manipulation that nearly cost me everything. I grew up in a tidy middle-class suburb outside Boston, in a white colonial with blue shutters and a perfectly maintained lawn that my father Thomas obsessed over every weekend. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect American family, but inside those walls, my mother Diane ran everything with an iron grip, especially the finances. Every dollar that entered or left our household went through my mother. My father earned a decent salary as an engineer, but he never questioned where the money went. He would hand over his paycheck, and she would give him an allowance. It seemed normal to me as a child. That was just how families operated, I thought. Ryan came along when I was 4 years old. From the moment he arrived, it was clear he held a special place in our mother's heart that I never would. He had her wavy auburn hair and charming smile, while I took after my father with straight blonde hair and serious blue eyes. More than the physical differences, though, it was the rules that were different for us. When I was 10, I wanted to join the soccer team. We can't afford frivolous activities, my mother said. 2 weeks later, Ryan wanted an expensive gaming console. It appeared under the Christmas tree with a dozen games. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. My requests required saving budgeting, or were simply denied, while Ryan's were indulged without question. Eve is the responsible one, my mother would tell relatives at family gatherings, as if it were a compliment rather than a burden. She understands the value of money. What she really meant was that I had to earn everything, while Ryan was given everything. By high school, I had internalized this role completely. I studied relentlessly, knowing a scholarship was my only ticket to college. My mother made it clear that there wasn't money for expensive education, at least not for me. I worked part-time jobs, saved every dollar, and applied for every scholarship I could find. The hard work paid off when I received a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University. The night I got my acceptance letter, my parents took us out to dinner to celebrate. "We always knew you could do it," my mother said, then immediately turned the conversation to Ryan's struggling grades and how he just hadn't found his passion yet. College was my first taste of freedom. Being 600 miles away from home allowed me to breathe for the first time. I studied finance and economics, determined to understand the thing that had been used to control me throughout my childhood. Meanwhile, Ryan graduated high school with average grades and enrolled in the local community college. He lasted 1 semester before deciding it wasn't for him. He tried a technical program next, quit after 3 months. A job at our uncle's construction company, quit after 2 weeks because it was too hard on his back. Each new beginning was celebrated by my parents. Each abandonment was met with understanding and support. "He's finding himself," my mother would say. After graduating with honors, I accepted a position at a consulting firm in Chicago. The distance from Boston was intentional. I needed space to build my own life, free from the family dynamics that had defined my childhood. Over the next 10 years, I built a successful career as a financial analyst. I paid off my student loans, built an emergency fund, and started investing for retirement. I had a small but stylish apartment in Lincoln Park, good friends, and a career trajectory that was steadily moving upward. For the first time in my life, I felt in control. Then the calls started coming. Ryan needed money for a car repair. Ryan needed a security deposit for a new apartment. Ryan needed to pay off a credit card before the interest rate jumped. Each time I told myself it would be the last time. Each time I transferred the money with a growing pit in my stomach. The most frustrating part wasn't even Ryan asking. It was that these loans were never discussed again. No thank you, no repayment plan, not even an acknowledgement that it had happened. If I ever brought it up, my mother would intervene. He's going through a tough time right now. Or family helps family Eve. Don't be selfish. Last Christmas was the breaking point. I flew home with an expensive watch for my father and a designer scarf for my mother. Ryan gave everyone homemade coupons for quality time because he was a little short on cash right now. During dinner, my mother spent 20 minutes praising Ryan for an interview he had lined up at a marketing firm. He's got such a natural talent for connecting with people, she gushed. This could really be the beginning of something big for him. When I mentioned I was being considered for an international position that would advance my career significantly, my mother frowned. But you'd be so far away. And what about starting a family? You're not getting any younger, Eve. I returned to Chicago with a familiar heaviness in my chest and made an appointment with a therapist the next day. Dr. Keller helped me see what I had been blind to my entire life. My family had been using financial manipulation as a form of control, and I had been enabling it. Boundaries, Dr. Keller said, in our third session, are not just emotional. Financial boundaries are equally important in relationships. I spent the next 6 months working on those boundaries. Small steps at first, taking longer to respond to financial requests, asking for repayment plans, suggesting alternative solutions that didn't involve my bank account. Each tiny act of resistance was physically painful. The guilt was overwhelming, the fear of rejection paralyzing. And then came the text that would change everything. Monday mornings were sacred to me. I would wake up at 5:30, go for a run along Lake Michigan, and return home to enjoy a cup of coffee in peaceful silence before the work week began. This ritual gave me clarity and focus for whatever challenges lay ahead. On this particular Monday in September, I had just settled onto my balcony with my steaming coffee when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it. Another boundary I had been working on was not being constantly available to everyone, but something told me to look. The text was from Ryan. Hey sis, big news. I quit that stupid marketing job. Boss was a total jerk. Anyway, I'll need you to cover my rent for a few months while I find something better. It's $2,200 a month. Let me know when you can send the first payment. I stared at the screen, coffee, forgotten. The casual entitlement of it took my breath away. No question, no request, just an assumption that I would send money. $2,200 a month for a few months while he found something better. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as my heart raced. This was different from the emergency requests. This wasn't a car breaking down or an unexpected medical bill. He had chosen to quit his job without having another lined up. He was asking me to fund a lifestyle choice. In that moment, I flashed back to the last 3 major loans I'd given him. 8 months ago, $3,000 for car repairs after he crashed into a guardrail while texting. 14 months ago, $4,500 to pay off credit card debt he'd accumulated buying gaming equipment and designer clothes. 20 months ago, $6,000 for a security deposit and first month's rent on his luxury apartment, the same apartment he now expected me to pay for. None of those amounts had ever been repaid, not a single dollar. And here he was asking for $2,200 a month indefinitely. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. Dr. Keller's voice echoed in my mind. What would you tell a client who came to you with this situation? What financial advice would you give them? The answer was clear. This wasn't helping, it was enabling, and it needed to stop. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone again. I typed 6 words, "Pay it yourself." Then I hit send before I could change my mind. 3 dots appeared immediately. Ryan was typing. Then came the barrage. "What do you mean I need help right now? Are you serious? It's just money. You have plenty. Mom's going to be so disappointed in you. I thought family was supposed to help each other." "Fine. I'll just be homeless then. Is that what you want?" Each message was a perfectly aimed arrow at my deepest insecurities and fears. The guilt was overwhelming, threatening to drown me. My finger hovered over the phone, ready to take it all back, to apologize, to send the money, just to make the awful feeling stop. Instead, I silenced my phone, put it in a drawer, and got ready for work. I had an important meeting that morning. My boss had hinted that there was something big to discuss, and I needed to be focused. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the glass-walled conference room overlooking the Chicago skyline. My boss, Janet, was already there when I arrived, along with the head of international operations. My heart skipped a beat. "Eve," Janet said with a smile, "we've been incredibly impressed with your work these past few years. As you know, we're expanding our London office, and we need someone with your expertise to help lead the financial analysis team there. It would be a 2-year assignment with a significant salary increase and relocation package. We'd need you to start in January." The opportunity I had been working toward for years was finally being offered to me. A chance to prove myself on an international stage, to take on greater responsibility, to build something new. "I'd like to accept the position," I heard myself say before I had even processed the full offer. "I'm ready for this challenge." Janet looked surprised at my immediate response. "Don't you want to take some time to think about it? Discuss it with your family, perhaps?" "No," I said with unexpected firmness. "This is my decision. I want this." As we went through the details of the position, a strange sensation of lightness began to spread through me. For the first time in my adult life, I was making a major decision based solely on what I wanted, without considering how it would impact my ability to support Ryan or please my mother. By the end of the day, I had signed the preliminary contract. My hands were steady as I wrote my name on the dotted line. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by something new: pride. Pride in myself for choosing my own path. As I packed up my desk to head home, I finally checked my phone. 12 missed calls, 5 from Ryan, 7 from my mother, 23 text messages, 2 voicemails. I didn't listen to them. Instead, I called my closest friend Sophia and asked if she wanted to meet for dinner. We went to our favorite Italian restaurant and ordered champagne. To London, Sophia toasted, and to Eve, finally putting herself first. I clinked my glass against hers and smiled. "It feels terrifying and wonderful all at once." "That's how you know it's the right decision," she said. "And don't worry about your family. They'll adjust." I wasn't so sure about that, but for one evening, I allowed myself to celebrate without guilt. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with the fallout. The fallout came sooner than expected. When I returned to my apartment after dinner, I had another text message waiting for me. This one was from my mother. "Don't even think about coming home for Christmas until you co-sign Ryan's $156,000 business loan. He needs this opportunity, and you're trying to ruin his life by refusing to help. I raised you better than this, Eve. $156,000. A business loan. Cosign." The words blurred on the screen as panic flooded my system. This wasn't just about covering rent anymore. This was about legally tying myself to a massive debt for someone who had never completed anything in his life. I called my mother immediately, my celebration forgotten. "What business loan?" I demanded when she answered. "Ryan has an opportunity to buy into a bar downtown," she said, as if this explained everything. "It's a wonderful location, and the current owner is willing to sell for a very reasonable price. But Ryan needs a cosigner on the loan, since he doesn't have much credit history. It's only $156,000. Only $156,000. She said it as casually as if she were asking me to spot someone $5 for coffee. "He's never worked in a bar," I said. "He has no business experience. He just quit his job. How could this possibly be a good investment?" "Don't be so negative," my mother snapped. "Ryan has vision. He sees possibilities where others see problems. That's a rare gift." The conversation continued in this vein for 20 minutes. Every logical argument I made was dismissed. Every concern I raised was attributed to jealousy or selfishness. By the time I hung up, I was shaking with anger and anxiety. This wasn't a new pattern. My mother had used financial manipulation as control throughout my life. When I decided to major in finance instead of education as she had wanted, she threatened to stop visiting me at college. "Why should we waste gas money to see someone who doesn't value our input?" she had said. I changed my major to double, in both finance and education, to appease her taking extra credits every semester at great personal cost. When I got my first apartment in Chicago and refused to give her a key for emergencies, she withheld my childhood mementos, claiming there wasn't room in their house to store my junk anymore. I had to pay for a last-minute flight home and a rental car to retrieve boxes that had sat untouched in their attic for years. Money and material things were never just money and material things in my family. They were leverage, control, power. I sat on my couch in the dark, struggling to breathe as waves of panic washed over me. This was financial abuse, I realized. Doctor Keller had introduced the term in our sessions, but I had resisted it, thinking it sounded too extreme. Now I saw it clearly. I called Sophia, who came over immediately with ice cream and wine. "You can't co-sign that loan," she said firmly, after I explained the situation. "You know that, right? If Ryan defaults, which, let's be honest, is likely given his history, you would be responsible for the entire amount." "I know," I whispered, "but she's threatening to cut me off from the family. No more holidays, no contact." Sophia took my hands in hers. "Eve, listen to me. That's not love. That's manipulation. Real family doesn't put conditions like that on their relationship." After Sophia left, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. As a financial analyst, I knew exactly how risky co-signing a loan of that size would be. It would impact my debt-to-income ratio, potentially affect my ability to get housing in London, and if Ryan defaulted, it would devastate my credit and financial security for years. But there was something else nagging at me. I started looking into what other financial ties still bound me to my family. The results were shocking. I was paying for the family cell phone plan, all 4 lines. I was paying for the Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus subscriptions they all used. I was still listed as the emergency payment method on my parents' Amazon account. My mother had an authorized user card for one of my credit card accounts for emergencies. I was paying for the AAA memberships for both my parents and Ryan. The list went on and on. Small monthly charges that I had set up over the years and then forgotten about or felt too guilty to cancel. Added together, they amounted to hundreds of dollars every month. As the realization of how financially entangled I still was with my family sank in, something hardened inside me. If my mother wanted to play financial hardball, I could play too. I had learned from the best, after all. With methodical precision, I began canceling everything. I removed myself from the family cell phone plan after transferring my number to a new account. I canceled all the streaming subscriptions. I removed my card from every account. I called the credit card company and canceled the authorized user card. With each cancellation, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. Lighter because I was freeing myself from financial manipulation. Heavier because I knew what the response would be. By 2 in the morning, I had untangled every financial connection I could find. The only things I couldn't cancel immediately were long-term commitments, like insurance policies, which I made notes to address during business hours. I turned my phone off completely before going to bed. Tomorrow would bring the storm, and I needed whatever rest I could get before facing it. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the insistent buzzing of my landline, a phone I kept primarily for work emergencies. When I answered, my father's tired voice came through. "Eve, your mother and brother are beside themselves. They've been trying to reach you all night." I took a deep breath. I turned my phone off. I needed to sleep. "Could you please turn it back on? They need to talk to you." The guilt in his voice made my chest tighten, but I held firm. "Dad, I'll turn it on in a bit, but first I need you to understand something. I'm not going to co-sign that loan. It's financially irresponsible, and I won't be manipulated into it." There was a long pause. I know he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "But you know how your mother gets. And Ryan, he's convinced this bar is his big break." "Dad, has anyone seen a business plan, projected revenues? Anything that suggests this is a viable business rather than just another of Ryan's impulses?" "Your brother has vision, Eve," he said, repeating my mother's words. "Vision doesn't pay back loans," I replied. "I have to go to work now. I'll call later." When I finally turned my phone back on, I was greeted with 36 missed calls, dozens of text messages, and multiple voicemails. The calls were primarily from my mother and Ryan, but there were also several from aunts, uncles, and even my cousin Tara, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. The voicemails ranged from Ryan's anger, "You're being a complete bitch about this," to my mother's tears. "How could you do this to your brother, to your family?" to my father's quiet pleading, "Please just call your plead. Mother, we can work this out." The most disturbing discovery was a group text my mother had sent to our extended family. Prayer request: Eve has abandoned her brother in his time of need and is refusing to help him secure his future. She has also vindictively cut off our cell service and other necessities without warning. Please reach out to her and help her remember the importance of family. My hands shook with anger as I read the message. The blatant misrepresentation, the public shaming, the mobilization of flying monkeys to pressure me, it was manipulation at its finest. The calls from relatives started coming in immediately. My Aunt Linda family helps Family Eve. My Uncle Steve, "Your mother is just beside herself." My cousin Mark, "Dude, just help Ryan out. It's not that big a deal." Not one of them asked for my side of the story. Not one questioned whether co-signing a six-figure loan was a reasonable request. They had received their marching orders from my mother, and they were following them without question. I silenced my phone again and went to work. The office became my sanctuary, a place where decisions were made based on data and logic, not emotional manipulation, where my value was measured by my contributions, not my compliance. I managed to focus on my work until early evening when my assistant knocked on my office door. "There's someone here to see you," she said, looking uncomfortable. "He says he's your brother, and it's an emergency." Ryan had never visited me at work before. He didn't even know where my office was located. He must have been desperate to track me down here. I'll come out, I said, not wanting to bring family drama into my private office. Ryan was standing in the reception area, looking simultaneously angry and smug. He was wearing an expensive leather jacket I'd never seen before, and designer jeans. Not the appearance of someone in dire financial straits. "We need to talk," he said when he saw me. "Privately." I led him to a small conference room and closed the door. "How did you even know where I work?" "Mom called your friend Sophia and pretended she needed to send you something important." The invasion of privacy made my blood boil, but I kept my face neutral. "What do you want, Ryan?" "What do I want? I want my sister back. The one who cared about her family. You've turned into some kind of heartless robot. Mom is crying all the time, and you just don't care." "I care very much," I said quietly. "But I'm not going to co-sign a loan that size for a business venture you have no experience in." "You think I can't do it," he said, his face flushed. "You've always thought you were better than me." "That's not true. But I do think you have a pattern of starting things and not finishing them, and that makes you a high-risk borrower." "Mom said you have plenty of money," he shot back. "She said you're just being selfish." There it was. My mother had been painting me as the wealthy one. The one holding out, the one with resources to spare. It was time to correct that narrative. I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial records. "Look at this, Ryan. These are my student loans that I'm still paying off. This is my rent. These are my retirement contributions. This is my emergency fund. This is what I've been sending to you and Mom and Dad over the past 5 years." He stared at the screen, his expression shifting from anger to confusion, but Mom always said. "Mom says a lot of things. Not all of them are true." I could see the wheels turning in his head, the first cracks appearing in the narrative he'd been fed his entire life. For a brief moment, I thought we might be having a breakthrough. Then my mother walked in. To this day, I don't know how she got past building security. But suddenly, there she was, her face, a mask of righteous indignation. "So, this is where you hide to avoid your family responsibilities," she said, looking around the conference room with disdain. "Mom, look at this," Ryan said, pointing to my computer screen. "Eve has been sending us money all this time, and she's still paying off student loans." My mother barely glanced at the screen. "Your sister makes plenty of money. She can afford to help you. She's choosing not to because she's always been jealous of our relationship." Just like that, the moment of clarity was gone. Ryan's face hardened again as he fell back in line with my mother's version of reality. The argument escalated quickly. I tried to remain calm and rational, explaining why co-signing the loan was financially unsound, but my mother twisted every word. When I mentioned that I was moving to London, she acted as if I had kept it a secret to hurt them, rather than having just accepted the position the day before. My whole body was shaking with anxiety, but I stood my ground. Finally, my mother delivered her ultimatum. "Either you co-sign the loan and show that you're committed to this family, or you're not part of this family anymore. It's that simple." The conference room fell silent. Ryan looked uncomfortable, but didn't contradict her. I took a deep breath and made the hardest decision of my life. Then I guess I'm not part of the family anymore. My mother's face went blank with shock. She had never anticipated that I would choose myself over her approval. In her worldview, that option didn't exist. "You don't mean that," she said. "I do," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I love you all, but I won't be manipulated anymore. Not with money, not with guilt, not with family ties." I walked them out of the building in silence. As we reached the street, my mother turned to me one last time. "You'll regret this," she said. "When you're all alone in a foreign country with no family to turn to, you'll realize what you've thrown away." I watched them walk away, feeling both hollowed out and strangely peaceful. The worst had happened. They had played their ultimate card, exclusion from the family, and I had survived. The next day, the social media campaign began. My mother posted a heartfelt plea for prayers for her lost daughter, who has turned her back on her family in their time of need. She didn't name me directly, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Comments flooded in offering support to my poor mother and condemning the unnamed daughter's selfishness. Ryan was more direct, posting a rant about privileged sisters who think they're too good for family and how some people just love money more than people. He tagged me in it initially, then removed the tag when some of my friends started questioning his version of events. Sophia and my other close friends rallied around me, countering the narrative where they could, but mostly just offering support and validation. "This is classic narcissistic family dynamics," my friend Michael, a psychologist, told me over dinner. "When the scapegoat stops playing their assigned role, the whole system goes into crisis." I started to see that my role in the family had always been the provider, the responsible one, the one who could be relied upon to cave under guilt and obligation. By refusing to play that role anymore, I had disrupted the entire family system. The backlash was painful, but predictable. As December approached, I threw myself into preparations for the London move. The international team had found me a furnished flat in Notting Hill, and I was in the process of deciding what to take with me, what to store, and what to sell or donate. Sorting through my belongings became an unexpected emotional journey. Each item seemed connected to a memory or a person, forcing me to confront the reality of my family estrangement over and over again. The carved wooden box my father had made me for my 16th birthday, the one I kept my special jewelry in. The Christmas ornament my grandmother had given me before she passed. The faded concert t-shirt Ryan and I had bought together at the first show we attended without parents. Dr. Keller helped me process the grief that came with each discovery. "You're not just packing for a move," she observed. "You're sorting through the pieces of your old life and deciding what deserves a place in your new one." In our sessions, we talked about the difference between cutting ties and establishing boundaries, about the possibility of rebuilding relationships on healthier terms in the future, about the grief of losing the family I wished I had rather than the one I actually had. "Family estrangement is a special kind of loss," she said. "It's ambiguous because the people are still out there living their lives. You're mourning a relationship that still exists but has become harmful." 2 weeks before Christmas, I received an unexpected text from my father asking to meet. We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between my apartment and his hotel. I was surprised to learn he was in Chicago on business and hadn't told me. He looked older than I, remembered the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he finally said. "She wouldn't understand." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I want you to know that I understand why you won't co-sign that loan. It's a lot of money, and Ryan's track record isn't great." He stared down at his coffee. "I tried to tell your mother that, but she doesn't want to hear it." "Why does she push so hard for him?" I asked the question that had haunted me my entire life, finally finding voice. My father sighed heavily. "There's something you should know about your mother. Her father, your grandfather, lost everything when she was a teenager. He had invested the family's entire savings in a business venture that failed. They went from comfortable to nearly homeless overnight." I had never heard this story before. My mother rarely spoke about her childhood. She had to drop out of college, take a job as a waitress to help support the family. I think. I think she's terrified of Ryan ending up like that. So she pushes me to support him, pushes you to support him, tries to make sure he'll always have a safety net. But she's creating the very dependency she fears, I said. I know. He looked up at me, his eyes tired but clear. I've enabled it too. It was easier to go along with her demands than to stand up to her. I'm not proud of that. He hesitated, then continued. There's something else you should know, the house. It's not paid off like she's always claimed. There's a second mortgage and several credit card debts. She's been borrowing against the equity for years to give money to Ryan for his various ventures. The revelation shocked me. My mother, who had lectured me about financial responsibility my entire life, who had scrutinized my every purchase and criticized my wasteful spending, had been secretly accumulating debt. Does Ryan know about this? I asked. No. Your mother doesn't want him to worry. He laughed humorlessly. She doesn't want him to feel like a burden. As we continued talking, I realized that my father was also a victim of my mother's financial manipulation, albeit one who had been complicit in his own subjugation. He had surrendered his financial autonomy decades ago and now felt powerless to reclaim it. Why don't you leave? I asked him quietly. He looked startled by the question. She's my wife. We've been together for 35 years. But are you happy? He didn't answer directly. At our age, you settle into patterns. Breaking them is challenging. As we parted, he hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Eve, for standing up for yourself, for making a life on your terms. I should have done the same at your age. The meeting with my father left me with mixed emotions. Compassion for both my parents caught in a dysfunctional pattern that neither seemed able to break. Anger at the decades of manipulation. Sadness for what might have been in a healthier family dynamic. It also left me with a dilemma, whether to go home for Christmas despite my mother's ban. Sophia and my other friends in Chicago invited me to join their holiday celebrations. Chosen family is still family, Sophia insisted. We had a lovely pre-Christmas dinner party where we exchanged gifts and drank too much wine and talked about everything except my family situation. But as Christmas Eve approached, I found myself increasingly drawn to the idea of going home one last time before moving to London. Not to cave to my mother's demands, but to say goodbye to the home that despite everything had shaped me, to have closure. The night before my planned departure, I sat on my bed, surrounded by partially packed boxes, and made my decision. I would go. Not with expensive gifts and an apology, but with modest, thoughtful presence and firm boundaries. I bought my father a leather-bound edition of his favorite mystery author's latest book. For my mother, a small watercolor painting of Boston Common in spring. For Ryan, a business book about entrepreneurship that had helped me early in my career. As I boarded the plane to Boston the next morning, I felt a curious mix of dread and determination. Whatever happened over the next few days, I would face it as the person I was now, not the compliant daughter I had been trained to be. The taxi dropped me off in front of my childhood home at 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The house was decorated as elaborately as always, lights outlining every architectural feature, a giant wreath on the door, and the life-sized nutcrackers flanking the front steps that my mother brought out every year. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, gathering my courage before walking up to the front door. I had a key, but chose to ring the doorbell instead. This was no longer my home. I was a visitor now. My father answered, his eyes widening in surprise. "Eve! You came!" He pulled me into a tight hug, whispering, "Your mother doesn't know you were coming." I stepped into the house, the familiar smells of pine and cinnamon bringing a rush of memories. My mother was in the kitchen, her back to me, as she arranged cookies on a serving plate. Ryan was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Look who's here," my father announced, his voice overly bright. My mother turned, her face shifting rapidly from shock to anger to a forced smile. "Eve, what a surprise." Ryan looked up, his expression unreadable. "Hey." The tension in the room was palpable. My mother wiped her hands on her apron, her movements stiff. "Well, I suppose you can help set the table for dinner. We have guests coming in an hour." "No, how are you?" "No, I've missed you." Just straight to assigning tasks, as if I were a tardy servant rather than her daughter. I set down my small bag of gifts. "I brought these for you all. Nothing expensive, just some small things I thought you might like." My mother looked at the simple wrapping paper with barely concealed disdain. "How thoughtful. I'll put them under the tree." The evening proceeded with excruciating politeness as extended family arrived for the traditional Christmas Eve dinner. Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, Uncle Robert, and their 3 children, my father's brother Frank, and his wife Julia. Everyone making stilted small talk, carefully avoiding any mention of the family drama that had clearly been circulating in hushed phone calls and text messages. I could feel their curious eyes on me throughout dinner, wondering if I was the villain my mother had painted me to be, wondering what kind of daughter refuses to help her brother, wondering why I was even here, if I was so selfish and uncaring. The breaking point came during dessert. My mother, perhaps emboldened by her second glass of wine, cleared her throat for attention. "Since we're all gathered here as family," she began, her voice taking on the martyred tone I knew so well, "I want to thank you all for your prayers and support during this difficult time. As you know, Ryan has a wonderful business opportunity, but certain people have been unwilling to help him pursue his dreams." All eyes shifted to me. The silence in the room was deafening. Something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed feelings, the resentment, the hurt, the anger, rose to the surface. But instead of the emotional outburst my mother was clearly hoping to provoke, I spoke calmly and clearly. "I think it's time we talked about financial manipulation in this family." My mother's face paled. "This isn't the time or place, Eve." "Actually, since you brought it up in front of everyone, I think it's exactly the time and place. For years, I've been expected to bail out Ryan whenever he needs money. I've been paying for phone bills, streaming services, and emergency expenses without complaint. But co-signing a $156,000 loan crosses a line, and when I refused, I was told I wasn't welcome in this family anymore." The shocked expressions around the table told me that my mother's version of events had been significantly edited. "That's not true," my mother sputtered. "I never said you weren't welcome. I just said actions have consequences. You literally texted me not to come home for Christmas unless I co-signed the loan," I said. "Those were your exact words." Ryan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Mom, did you really say that to her?" My mother's face flushed. I was upset. "Eve knows I didn't mean it literally." "Actually, I said I think you meant it very literally. Just like you meant it when you told Ryan, 'I have plenty of money and can easily afford to support him.' Which isn't true, as I showed him when he came to my office." Ryan looked at our mother. "Eve showed me her finances, Mom. She's still paying off student loans. She's not as rich as you've been saying." A murmur went around the table. My mother's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to unravel. "Well, she makes more than enough to help her brother," my mother insisted. "She's always been selfish with her money." "Is that why you never told me about the second mortgage on the house?" I asked quietly. Or the credit card debt because I'm the selfish one with money? My mother's head snapped toward my father. You told her about that. How could you? Aunt Susan, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. Diane, do you have financial problems you haven't told us about? Of course not, my mother said quickly. Just a small home equity loan for some renovations. Nothing to worry about. It's not small, and it wasn't for renovations, my father said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. It was to cover Ryan's failed business ventures and living expenses. It's over $100,000 now. The room erupted in confused conversation. In the midst of it, Aunt Susan caught my eye and gave me a small nod. Later she would tell me that she had seen this pattern before. It was how our grandmother had controlled the family as well, using money as leverage, creating dependency, punishing independence. Your mother learned it from her mother, she told me, just as your grandmother learned it from hers. Financial manipulation has been the family inheritance for generations of women in our family. As the truth spilled out across the dining room table that Christmas Eve, I watched my mother's face cycle through emotions, anger, fear, defiance, and finally, a devastating vulnerability. For the first time, I saw her not as the all-powerful matriarch who had controlled my life, but as someone damaged by her own past, perpetuating patterns she didn't know how to break. Mom, I said, when the room had quieted somewhat, I understand now why you're so afraid of Ryan ending up like Grandpa losing everything. But don't you see that by making him dependent on handouts, you're not teaching him to be financially stable? You're teaching him to rely on others instead of himself. I'm just trying to help him, she said, her voice small. I know, but there are better ways to help. I turned to Ryan. And you need to understand that I care about you deeply, but I can't be your personal ATM. It's not good for either of us. Ryan looked embarrassed but nodded. I've been thinking about what you said at your office, about my pattern of quitting things. You're not wrong. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of his role in the dysfunction, but it was a start. The rest of the evening was tense but oddly cathartic. Family secrets that had been festering in darkness were finally exposed to light. My mother retreated to her bedroom early, claiming a headache. My father, looking both exhausted and relieved, thanked me for coming. It needed to be said, he whispered. All of it. I didn't stay at the house that night. I had booked a hotel room in town, anticipating that I might need neutral territory. As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and liberation. The confrontation had been painful but necessary. The truth had been spoken, but the damage to our relationships might be irreparable. In my hotel room, I called Sophia to update her. It sounds like you stood your ground, she said proudly. How do you feel? Like I've lost and found myself all at once, I answered. I'm sad about how it all played out, but I don't regret saying what needed to be said. That's growth, she said. Painful, beautiful growth. 3 months later, I was settled in my London flat, a bright 2-bedroom in Notting Hill with large windows that let in whatever sunlight the English weather permitted. My job at the international office was challenging in the best way, pushing me to expand my skills and perspective. I had made a few work friends and was slowly building a life in this new city. The transition hadn't been without difficulties. Moving to another country meant navigating new systems, cultural differences, and the profound loneliness that sometimes comes with being far from familiar places and faces. There were days when I questioned my decision nights, when I lay awake, missing the comfort of known surroundings. But there were also moments of exhilaration. Walking through Regent's Park on a crisp morning, discovering a tiny bookshop tucked away on a cobblestone street. Successfully navigating the tube system without getting lost. small victories that reminded me why I had made this leap. My relationship with my family was evolving in unexpected ways. My father and I had weekly video calls, conversations that felt more honest and equal than any we'd had before. He had started seeing a therapist himself, working through decades of passivity and codependence. I should have stood up for you more, he told me during one call, both when you were growing up and in recent years. I'm sorry for that. You were caught in her web too, Dad, I said. We all were. My mother and I had limited contact. She had sent a brief email after I moved formal and distant, making no mention of our Christmas confrontation. I responded with equal brevity, leaving the door open for future communication without extending myself too far. Healing, if it was to happen, would take time and changed behavior on both sides. The biggest surprise was Ryan. A month after Christmas, he had found a job at a marketing firm without any help from family. He had moved to a smaller apartment he could afford on his own. He had started seeing a therapist too, beginning to unpack the ways our family dynamics had shaped his expectations and behavior. I never realized how much Mom babied me, he said during one of our occasional phone calls. Or how much pressure she put on you to be the responsible one. It wasn't fair to either of us. He was still Ryan, impulsive, charismatic, slightly self-centered. But there was a new awareness to him, a willingness to examine his role in the family system that gave me cautious hope for his growth. The financial peace I felt was perhaps the most profound change. For the first time in my adult life, every dollar I earned was truly mine. There were no unexpected calls for emergency funds, no guilt-laden requests for loans that would never be repaid. I could budget, save, and spend according to my own priorities without the constant anxiety that someone else's financial crisis would derail my plans. I had just gotten home from work one Friday evening in late March when my phone rang with a video call from Ryan, an unusual occurrence. "Guess where I am," he said when I answered. The background showed what looked like an airport terminal. "No idea," I replied, puzzled. "Heathrow, I'm in London." His face was alight with excitement. "Surprise visit, I saved up for the ticket myself." I was momentarily speechless. This was so different from the old Ryan, who would have expected me to fund such a trip. Wow, that's amazing. When did you plan this?" "Been saving for 3 months," he said proudly. "Ever since Christmas, wanted to show you I can do things on my own. Got a good deal on the flight, found a cheap hostel. I'm not expecting to stay with you or anything. Just thought it would be cool to see where you live now, maybe get dinner or something." We met at a pub near my flat, both of us slightly awkward at first. But as the evening progressed, we fell into an easier rhythm, sharing stories and observations, without the shadow of our mother between us. "I need to tell you something," he said after his second pint. "I'm sorry for how I treated you all these years. Taking your money, expecting you to bail me out, getting mad when you wouldn't. It wasn't right." "Thank you for saying that," I said, genuinely touched by the apology. "I contributed to it too, you know. By always saying yes, by never setting boundaries. It was easier to just give in than to deal with the guilt of saying no. We were both stuck in those roles Mom created for us," he said thoughtfully. "You, the responsible provider, me, the helpless baby. Breaking out of that is hard." "It is," I agreed, "but necessary." Over the next few days, I showed Ryan around London when I wasn't working. We visited museums, walked along the Thames, and took selfies at all the tourist spots to send back to our father. It wasn't perfect. Ryan was still Ryan, with his impulsiveness and occasional self-centeredness, but it was the healthiest our relationship had ever been. On his last night in London, we had a heart-to-heart conversation about the future of our family. "Do you think Mom will ever change?" he asked as we sat on the small balcony of my flat watching the city lights. I don't know, I answered honestly. Change requires acknowledging there's a problem, and Mom isn't there yet, but I've learned never to say never. Dad's different already, Ryan observed. He actually disagreed with her last week about something. I thought she was going to have a stroke. We laughed, a mix of humor and sadness in the sound. We can break the pattern, though, I said. That's what matters. We can choose not to carry this forward. Ryan nodded. No kids of mine are going to be put in the roles we were, and no using money to control people. Exactly. We learn, we heal, we do better. As I put Ryan in a taxi to the airport the next morning, I felt a cautious optimism about our future as siblings. The damage of decades couldn't be undone in a single visit, but we had taken significant steps toward a healthier relationship. In the months that followed, I continued to build my life in London and my career at the international office. I maintained boundaries with my mother while leaving room for potential reconciliation. I deepened my friendship with my father, getting to know him as a person rather than just a parent. I worked with my therapist on recognizing and changing my own patterns of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance. As Christmas approached again, I faced another decision: where and with whom to spend the holiday. After much consideration, I decided to invite my father and Ryan to London. My mother would be welcome too, I told them, but only if she could respect my boundaries. She declined, as I expected she would. But my father and Ryan accepted, marking the first Christmas I would celebrate on my terms, in my home, with my boundaries intact. Financial manipulation had been a destructive force in my family for generations, creating toxic patterns of control and dependency. Breaking free had required painful confrontations, difficult choices, and the courage to risk rejection. The journey wasn't over. Healing rarely follows a neat linear path, but I had taken the crucial first steps. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family, know that you're not alone. Financial boundaries are just as important as emotional ones, and establishing them is an act of self-care, not selfishness. Have you ever had to set difficult financial boundaries with family? Comment below and share your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that choosing financial health over toxic expectations is not just okay, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, true family supports your growth, not your dependency.